Welcome! This time on WoodWorks, we're going to make this bar stool, crafted from quarter sawn white oak and designed for durability and style. Hi, I'm David Marks. Welcome to WoodWorks. This bar stool is great to look at, and it appears to be fairly simple in design. But actually, there's some very interesting woodworking challenges that we'll get into while working on this project. Our bar stool has laminated mortise and tenon joinery that's integrated into the seat, and the seat and tenons are sculpted to add comfort. The shape stretchers are accented by brass pins, and the legs sit at a pleasing angle with a taper that narrows towards the top. Combining both strength and style, this bar stool is an impressive piece. As we go through the process of putting our bar stool together, we're going to show you how these laminated tenons combine together with other components to make up the seat. It's kind of like arranging pieces of a puzzle. But we'll get into that a little bit more later on. First, let's take a look at our legs. This is a tapered design, and they're thicker at the foot, which gives our bar stool a stronger stance. As we move towards the top, they taper and get thinner, which is more pleasing for the eye. Now, to cut the taper in our leg, we're going to use this easy-to-use tapering jig. It's got a stop block at the top and another one at the bottom. Now, the one at the bottom has a rabbet cut in it, and it's already set to give us the angle we need to cut the taper in our leg. Now, here's a helpful tip. We've glued some sandpaper into place at the top and the bottom, and that will help to hold our leg securely in position so it doesn't slip out while we're cutting the taper in our leg. To complete the taper in our legs, we make a cut on one side. Rotate the stock 90 degrees, then make a second cut on the adjacent side. With our tapers cut, our legs are basically complete. Now we can start working on our seat. Now we've got this exploded view at the bottom of our seat to show you how the parts and pieces of the puzzle all come together. Now, we spoke earlier about doing a laminated mortise and tenon joint, and here's how it works. The top of our leg becomes our tenon, and we glue up the various pieces of the seat around it to form our mortise. And once we have that done, we'll do it again here, here, and here, and that will give us the 4 legs for our bar stool. Now, this was kind of a complicated process, working out all the angle cuts in this seat. But we've already done all the homework for you, so all you've got to do is to follow along, and we'll show you how to build this step by step. We start by milling up the stock for our seat. We run it through the jointer and planer to get flat and parallel surfaces. Then we cut the stock to size on the table saw. To get the footprint that we want, we decided to set our legs at a 6-degree angle. And to attach our legs to the bottom of our seat, we've got to match that angle. So, we'll start with the center section for our seat, and we'll cut both sides at a 6-degree angle. We cut the first edge of our center section with the top of the seat face up. Then flip it lengthwise and cut our 6-degree angle on the second edge. On the side pieces, we put the top of the seat face down and cut angles that will match up with the center section of our seat. We've got the angle cuts on our centerpiece and on our sides, and these fit together well. Now we need to create a space for our legs to fit into. So to do that, we're going to cut a strip off of our sides. Now I'll cut that at a 6-degree angle, and that way our legs can camp back to 6 degrees in that direction. Now we'll take this strip and we'll cut this into sections. We'll cut those also at a 6-degree angle, and this way our legs will camp back to 6 degrees in this direction. It's a good idea to draw a center line across the 3 sections first, so we can line them up later. Then we can cut the strips off the sides. To cut our strip into sections, we're going to be using the table saw and the miter gauge and setting our miter gauge at a 6-degree angle. Now there's a couple of things that are important to remember. First, we want to make sure that the length of the center section of our strip matches the width of the center section of our seat. That way the tops of our legs will be equally spaced apart. Second, we want to make sure that the bottom of our strip matches up with the miter gauge. And that way we have the correct reference and our legs will be splayed at the right angle. To ensure an accurate angle cut, we double stick tape our stock to the fence. Now it's time to assemble them together. To attach our legs to our seat, we're going to be making these U-shaped assemblies. Those will consist of 2 legs and the center section of our strip. Now when we glue this up, we want to make sure that this dries nice and flat, because later on we'll take this assembly and glue it to this section of our seat. Now for the glue up, we'll be using polyurethane glue, which will give us more working time and also dry faster than the standard yellow glue. Now here's a good tip for our glue up. A brad tapped into the ends of our center stock with the top nipped off will really help to keep the legs from slipping along the angled cuts when the clamps are added. Once the leg assemblies are dry, we scrape off the excess glue. Then grind the tops of our legs flat on the disc sander so they'll be flush with the top of our seat. And finally, we glue our leg assemblies to the sides of our seat and set them aside for a couple of hours to dry. Our legs are glued firmly into the side sections of our seat. Now we need to take the side sections and glue those to the center section of the seat. But before we do that, we need to prepare this surface for gluing. So, we're back at the table saw. We've got our blade set back at a 6-degree angle. And we want to make sure that we don't notch up into this portion of the leg. So it's important that we have the height of the blade level with the bottom of the seat. Now with everything dialed into place, we're just going to take a small shaving off of the side here, about a 32nd of an inch, to remove this portion of the leg stock that's protruding just a little bit. Any leftover excess is easily cleaned up with a sharp chisel. These notches that we've created at the top of the legs while preparing this section for gluing aren't going to be a problem, because once we glue this up, it's going to blend right into the center section. So, now that we've checked our fit, we'll spread some glue on there and clamp it up. After we assemble the 3 main sections of the seat and legs, we clamp them up and set them aside to dry for about 3 hours. The glue is dried on our legs and on our seat, so we finally got the pieces of our puzzle together. So now the complicated part is behind us, and we can relax a little bit and work on the stretchers that will connect all of our legs together. Now we're using a template, and what this will do is give us the same height all the way around on our legs. So with those pencil marks in place, we'll take our stretcher stock, set that up here. We'll scribe some pencil lines underneath. Now once these pencil lines are drawn, we can take these and cut those out, and with our stretchers in place, that'll add some structural support to our bar stool. To make sure the surfaces are flat, we grind the ends of our stretchers on the disc sander. We've checked the fit of our stretchers, and next we need to cut out the profile. So for that, we've got a stretcher template, of course. Now, this has got the profile already cut out along the edge. So we'll set this into place on our stretcher, mark up our center lines, and we'll lay out some pencil marks. Then we can take it to the bandsaw and cut out our profile. Next, we glue 2 stretchers into place with some 5-minute epoxy. We waited until the glue dried on these 2 side stretchers before taking the measurements on this bottom and top stretcher. Now the reason that we did that was because these legs have a little bit of flex in them. So once we had these secured into position, we could get a more accurate measurement on the bottom and the top stretcher. Now with this one secured into position, all we've got to do is check the fit on this last one, and then we can glue it into place. After the glue dried on our stretchers, we used some scrapers to flush up our stretchers with our legs. Now we're drilling some holes for the pins to lock our stretchers into position. Now we've drilled these holes so that they're towed at an angle, and that'll give our brass pins some more retention. We're also going to leave that brass exposed on the legs, and that'll make for a nice detail. We use a 3/16 inch brad point bit to drill our holes, towing them in slightly. To make the pins, we cut some 3/16 inch brass dowel stock into sections that are 2 inches long. And here's a tip: roughing up the pins with some sandpaper will make them adhere better to the crazy glue we put in the holes. With the pins in place, we seat them with a few blows of the hammer. And finally, we use a file to flush up the pins with our legs, finishing off the fine work with some sandpaper. Nobody likes a bar stool that rocks back and forth, so we've set ours on top of the table saw, which is a nice flat surface. We'll use that as a reference point to scribe some lines around the bottom of our legs, which we'll use to make our bar stool level. Now I've put some green tape around the bottom of our legs, and that way our pencil lines will show up really clearly. Now once we're done, we'll take a belt sander and just grind away the bottom of our legs till our bar stool sits level. Once we leveled the legs on our bar stool, we began the process of shaping the seat. Now we've got a template that we've made with a perfect profile for the top. When we put this on here, we scribed a pencil line all the way around the perimeter. Then we took a jigsaw and rough cut all the way around to get the bulk of the material off. So the next step is to clean up this rough cut, and we'll do that over at the router table using a flush bearing bit. Now we'll need to attach our template firmly into place, and we don't want to use a clamp to do that because a clamp is going to be in the way at the router table. So our next best bet will be to use a hot melt glue gun. We'll lay down a bead of glue all the way around the top, and then we'll press our template firmly into place, and that'll give us a good temporary bond. So once the glue is set, we'll take it to the router table and flush trim it all the way around. Our seat stock is taller than our flush bearing bit, so we'll use the template to start cutting the lower part of our seat. Then we'll remove the template and raise the bit to cut the shape on the rest of the seat. Using a variable speed router set at 10,000 RPMs, we'll minimize vibration and ensure a safe, clean cut. Next, we use a hand router with a 3/4 inch radius bit to round over the top edge of the seat. Our next step is to sculpt the bottom edge of our bar stool. Now it's a good idea whenever you're doing any sculpting to delineate your boundaries. So we're using a compass to scribe a pencil line 1 inch in from the edge of our seat. Now we've also added a piece of green tape, and this will clearly define the bottom edge of that radius that we just routed. Now our plan is to carve a bevel that'll go from this line to the bottom edge of our radius. Now to do that, we're going to be using a power grinder with a sculpting blade in it. Once we've got the bevel on the bottom, we sculpt a comfortable curve in the top of the seat, and that includes the through tenons. Our sculpting tool made short work of roughing out this edge and creating this bevel that we want, but it left behind some gouge marks. So we're going to use a disc sander with a 50 grit disc on here. We'll come along and smooth this out and blend out those rough marks, and that'll get us pretty close to the final form we want. Now, we're just a few steps away from finishing our bar stool. Now we're ready to smooth things out for our finish. We finished varying the shape of our seat using our disc sander. Now the disc left behind some coarse sanding scratches, and we want to get those out of there. So we're going to move over to our dual action air sander. We're going to start out at 60 grit, and we'll work our way up through 4 stages to 220 grit. That'll give us a nice, smooth, silky surface, and then we can put the finish on. The air sander is ideal for this job because it's more powerful than an electric sander, and the dual action leaves a finer surface. We've done our final sanding, and we've given our bar stool one last final inspection, and now we're ready to put the finish on. Now along the way, we used an 1/8 inch radius bit and a handheld router to soften these edges of our legs. And we used a pattern maker's rasp to shape these stretchers, give them that final soft shape and feel. So now, a few coats of tung oil and our bar stool will be complete. The sculpted seat of our bar stool looks great when accented by the laminated through tenons. The slender legs flow smoothly into the curved stretchers, with the brass pins adding a warm highlight. And the quarter sawn white oak is an excellent choice for the rugged beauty of this bar stool. As you can imagine, the seat and rails of our bar stool are going to get some wear over the years. So in order to maintain it, just give it another coat of oil as needed. I'm David Marks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you right here next time on WoodWorks.